Mario vs. Donkey Kong just came out, and even though it's a pretty bare-bones remake of a GBA game that was pretty simple to begin with, I think it still has a lot of potential for customization. So without further ado, let's mod it. Surprisingly, the game uses the module system engine that's been used for some of Nintendo's biggest releases in the past 2 years, like Splatoon 3, Super Mario Bros. Wonder, and even Tears of the Kingdom. That doesn't mean you can just drag and drop enemies or objects between these games, just that they're all structured in a very similar way internally. And that's great news for us, since modders have had nearly 2 years to figure out how games that use this engine work at this point, and that knowledge mostly carries over from game to game. Here, just look at Super Mario Bros. Wonder's folder structure compared to Mario vs. Donkey Kong. There are some differences, but the broad strokes are the same. Actually, we've even had the chance to dig through Mario vs. Donkey Kong's files for a while at this point as well, thanks to the demo that was released a few weeks ago. So let me run you through what we've discovered. I suppose we should start with something simple. It might not surprise you to learn that this fancy cutscene at the start of the game is in fact not rendered in real time. It's just a video file stored in the game's dedicated movie folder. In fact, the same also goes for these animated renders of Mario and Donkey Kong in the corners of the game's title screen. These are just two 40-second MP4 files that loop forever. And sure enough, we can swap these out with whatever we want. They even play audio.
Are you sure about that?
Not only does it have a lot of potential for memes, obviously, the fact that these videos could be swapped for anything else should also prove to be very useful for potential larger, more serious mods to include like custom cutscenes or whatever. But simply swapping some video files wasn't the first mod I tried to make for this game. I started with a tried and tested type of mod, a Mario texture edit. To make this, I opened Mario's model file using Switch Toolbox, which is a program that's like a Swiss Army knife for modding recent Nintendo games. I ignored this crazy Da Vinci looking model and instead just exported its textures, applied some super simple color changes, re-imported them, and there it is. Amazing, I know. In case it wasn't obvious, this is supposed to resemble Mario's color palette in the classic Donkey Kong arcade games. That seemed like a fitting first mod for me. But you know what? I've actually been learning to work with rigged 3D models recently, so let's apply some of those skills to this same model. I feel like the number one thing I've seen people say about this game is that it looks like the Super Mario 3D World theme in Super Mario Maker 2, though the games actually don't really share anything in common internally. So in honor of that, I decided to try and import the Builder Mario outfit into Mario vs. Donkey Kong. Let's head back to that Mario model in Switch Toolbox and export the full thing this time, and then open that up in Blender. I extracted the Builder Mario model from Super Mario Maker 2 using the same method, but at this point I realized that fully swapping these models would take a surprisingly large amount of effort. See, even though this game is kinda small and simple, the Mario model in this game is actually quite complex compared to most other Mario games. His eyebrows alone have like 8 points of articulation. So instead of trying to recreate that using this very different Mario Maker model, I took a bit of a shortcut by just attaching the belt from this model to the vanilla Mario vs. Donkey Kong model, and swapping his cap out as well. As you can see, I also did another texture edit, giving the Mario vs. Donkey Kong model the same color palette as Builder Mario, and there we go. I'm surprised by how natural this looks in-game. I suppose this outfit really fits with the city construction aesthetic of this environment. This Mario Maker outfit reminds me of something weird about this game, which is that there's no level editor. Most other Mario vs. Donkey Kong games allow you to make your own levels, so this feels like a pretty big missed opportunity. But hey, that doesn't mean it's impossible to edit levels, it just requires modding the game. Inside the bank folder, there's files that correspond to each area in each level. These can also be opened with Switch Toolbox, and this allows us to access what is basically a big list of every object placed inside the level. If you've seen some of my early Super Mario Bros. Wonder modding videos, this should look familiar, because this type of level formatting is also used there, meaning I knew exactly what I was looking at when I first discovered this. These translate values correspond to the object's coordinates, so sure enough, if I change the Y coordinate of this key object for example, you'll see that the key now spawns up in the air. Or here, I spent some quality time rearranging these red blocks to convey a subtle message. Maybe leave a comment telling me what this might mean. God. Anyways, so that's how we can mess with the level objects, so things like enemies or doors or switches or whatever. But how do we change the level's terrain? Well, this is something that surprised me about this game. Each area features a unique pre-compiled terrain model, instead of consisting of modular 3D tiles, like what that Super Mario Maker 2 3D World theme uses, for example. So although I did want to try and make a full custom level for this video, that's gonna have to wait for a future video, since I'll have to like fully 3D model the terrain for that myself, I guess. Still, not everything about the game's terrain is overly complicated. In fact, its collision is actually very simple. The actor folder inside of the game's pack folder contains configurations for every object in the game, and as it turns out, each level area in the game also counts as an object. We can once again open these files using Switch Toolbox, and one of the things these files contain is a list of every terrain tile that's placed in the level. So this 3D terrain is purely visual. The player's collision and interaction with that terrain is determined by a very simple grid of square tiles that can be moved and edited in this file. This is something where Mario vs Donkey Kong actually works very differently from Super Mario Bros. Wonder, since in that game the terrain isn't made up of tiles, it's made up of a list of points which form vertices for the ground. Actually, another noteworthy thing this file allows us to do is change the size of that 3D model terrain that gets rendered. I suppose this also does a good job of visualizing those invisible collision tiles I discussed. Let's see, what else is there to talk about? This same actor folder also has a file that determines the player's physics, with loads of variables that can easily be changed. So in case you thought Mario's controls were too slow in this game, I guess I kinda fixed that? Yeah, sure, whatever. I found it quite surprising to learn that all of the game's backgrounds are proper 3D models, considering Super Mario Bros. Wonder mostly fakes 3D visuals using flat renders in its background. I did try to replace one of these backgrounds with a Mushroom Kingdom background, but that didn't work out and left me with a sky background instead. Inside the sequence folder, there are several folders that handle parameters for things such as the game's levels. So editing files inside of those allows us to, for example, change the level's timer or even change the position of the level's screen borders. Another thing these files allow us to edit is which door in which level connects to which other level. So this allowed me to connect the game's first level to a much later level like this. I suppose that's kinda cool. So at this point, I think we've basically figured out everything we need to make a proper custom level. I guess I'm really just procrastinating by working on this video instead of my first custom level. Though, come to think of it, maybe I should play the game first? I've never actually played the original, and in case it wasn't obvious, this entire video was made using only the demo for the remake. So yeah, I guess if you're interested in seeing me make a proper custom level, let me know by leaving a like on this video and sharing it and stuff like that. I hope you enjoyed, thank you so much for watching, and bye bye!